And a happy Monday, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sean Barnard here with Sam Oshtry. This is another episode of Picks and Roll. And I know we are typically your basketball guys right here for Fox Sports The Gambler, but I don't know if you can see that or smell that outside right now, but it's sounding a lot like football to me. So, Sam Oshtry, before we get into it, how we doing this fine Monday? And you ready to start diving into some football waters here?
I'm good. I sure am. I mean, we still have Picks and Roll logo going up, so we're always going to be the basketball podcast and the basketball guys. But when it's football season, it's time to roll. When October comes around, September comes around with training camps, we'll be right there talking hoops again. But we're going to talk some football every Monday, recapping the weekends. But it's a drier time, but there's still a lot of stuff to talk about. And I'm good. I mean, I've been on the road. I was in Pittsburgh last week, and I'm going to Tennessee later this week. So been all over. But it's good to be back with you.
Yeah, love to hear it. Love to see the travels here. Bouncing back from a little wedding this weekend myself, but excited to get into the content world. And it is starting to shape up and feel like football season from the preseason on. A little bit of weather cooling off a little bit. I'm excited to get into it. So a couple of different angles we're going to attack things today. One of the biggest topics of conversation, really nationally this offseason, has been about the status of Jalen Hurts. So I want to get into that with Sam Oshtry today and have the discussion point of if you were to directly swap Jalen Hurts on another team in the NFL, how much better does that team get? So we're going to walk through that exercise there. But before we do that, would be remiss if we did not mention the Landon Dickerson injury at last night's open practice there. Could be a huge hit to this Eagles team at the time of recording and could change by the time this is being broadcast over the airwaves for Fox Sports The Gambler there. We do not have an exact injury for Landon Dickerson. It certainly did not look good. Him being carted off the field, not really capable of putting any weight on that right leg there. Sam, any thoughts on the Landon Dickerson issue and how much of a concern is this for you in your mind?
Yeah, so my StreamYard completely went out there, so hopefully you got me. But yeah, it's a huge concern. Landon Dickerson is one of the best offensive linemen in the entire NFL. And he's a huge part where you talk about why this offensive line is the best offensive line in the NFL. It's him, it's Jordan Mailata, it's Lane Johnson, it's the development of Cam Jurgens. Of course, Kai Becton was the guy last year. You got Tyler Steen in there now. This offensive line works so well as a unit. It's not just one individual. Yeah, Lane Johnson's one of the best tackles of all time. Yeah, Jordan Mailata is one of the best in the league. But it's as how they work as a unit. And Landon Dickerson is fully a part of that. So this would be a massive loss for the Eagles if he misses any type of significant time, because this team relies on winning in the trenches. That's the defensive line getting to the quarterback and the offensive line, and it's because of how much they relied on the running game. Yeah, Saquon's awesome. Saquon had a 2,000-yard rushing season. He's probably the best running back in the NFL. But he's a historically great running back right now at this point of his career because he also has a historically great offensive line that he's rushing behind. And that's the same with, it's not just when you talk about the Eagles rushing game, it's not just Saquon Barkley. It's the dual threat of Jalen Hurts and of his dual threat ability as a passer and as a runner. And then we talk about pairing that with Saquon when they run these options and you don't know who the ball is going to. That's what makes this rushing game so good. But it all happens because of the guys up front and the offensive line. So if Landon Dickerson misses significant time, it is a massive loss. When we look at their depth chart, you got Kenyon Green behind them at left guard, who could replace him. Nobody really knows what he looks like because he hasn't played significant snaps in the NFL. So this offensive line gets a lot shakier, especially when you talk about Tyler Steen too, where we don't exactly know how he's going to perform. You trust Jeff Statler, one of the best assistant coaches in the entire NFL, who of course is the Eagles offensive line coach, but you can only do so much development at this point of the season, mid-season. So this offensive line may not be as dominant as it's been without Landon Dickerson.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about all of that there. And this has in many ways been the strength of this Eagles team that they've built through the trenches for several years now. And that's been something that they're counting on to continue to be the identity of this team. You're right. We've seen Saquon Barkley without an elite offensive line and not putting up the ridiculous stat lines that were the case last year. Jalen Hurts, the effectiveness that he has. So obviously, we're not going to panic just yet at the time of us recording this year. Do not have the news for exactly what Landon Dickerson's injury is, but sending some prayers, sending some well wishes, and hopefully it is not bad as initially hoped. Now, to dive into the guy behind him, lining up under center or a little bit to the side of them there is Jalen Hurts here. And the conversation that I want to get into is the direct thought process of if you were to swap quarterbacks put Jalen Hurts on this same roster with the same coaching staff, same players around him, how much better does that team get? Now, there's a couple of these that I want to start with that I don't think we'll have much debate over. Then we'll get into the weeds of some of these teams of if Jalen Hurts was on this roster, would this make them a contender? So, Sam, I'm going to throw these your direction. We can have our back and forth. I think we'll start off pretty easy here. No objections in your mind to any of these teams that if Jalen Hurts were to swap for their current quarterback position, it would make them a better football team. So let me rattle off a couple here. The New Orleans Saints, the Cleveland Browns, the New York Jets, the Tennessee Titans, the Carolina Panthers, the New York Giants, and the Indianapolis Colts. Any objections to any of those teams?
I don't know. Did you see Shador Sanders in the preseason?
Yeah.
He might be the next Brady based on everyone's reaction to a preseason game. To a couple nice throws in there, and he played well. But yeah, obviously there's no question you'd rather have Hurts over any of those quarterback situations.
Yeah, when you have 4 quarterbacks, you have 0 quarterbacks, is I believe the saying out there in Cleveland right now. I can see a couple Jets fans give me a little bit of slack if you're a huge Justin Fields believer, but even a guy who is a Fields guy myself, I don't think we can have any.
That would just be absurd. There's no rationale you could find to justify having Justin Fields on your team over Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I don't think we can quite have those conversations at all. So I'll move up the ladder a little bit of NFL teams where we're starting to get into a little bit of muddy waters here. Las Vegas Raiders, Miami Dolphins, Seattle Seahawks, New England Patriots, and Arizona Cardinals. Any objections to those teams?
Yeah, no, I think Geno Smith would be an interesting one that I think a lot of people who are Hurts discounters would try to argue that Geno Smith in the Eagles situation. We've seen some great years from Geno Smith the last few years where he's been in good situations. So if he was in the Eagles situation, he could put up the production and maybe have the close to a win percentage that Jalen Hurts has. I don't see it that way. I think Jalen Hurts is just a much better quarterback, especially what he brings as a rusher that Geno Smith just doesn't have. And then you look at the other teams like the Falcons, Michael Penix Jr., we'll see. We'll see. Jury's still on him. We obviously have to see a full season of him. Tua, you couldn't make that argument at all. You said the Jaguars in there too, right?
I would skip them because I was going to single them out, but we can bring them up right now.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I was just looking at the odds here. So yeah, I would easily say I'd rather have Hurts over Trevor Lawrence, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I agree. I think there are some Geno Smith fans out here. The point that I would make, and one of the things that I think heavily plays into Jalen Hurts' favor, and something that I value him as a talent as, is we just know exactly who he is as a football player, man. He's just going to do Jalen Hurts things. To compare that with a guy like Geno Smith, there's been a wide range of what Geno Smith has looked like at the NFL level. Though we've seen this guy in recent years look pretty impressive as a pocket passer, gunslinger type of quarterback. We've also seen stretches where the turnover issues have been really significant, that he obviously has not held a job at any specific franchise for a long term there. I like Geno Smith. I think you can do far worse than him as a quarterback from a franchise perspective, but I don't think that there's any conversation about Jalen Hurts. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars conversation, I do think is interesting here. I'm not a Trevor Lawrence guy. I think, to be honest, the conversations about him are not as negative as they deserve to be. That I think there's been some legitimate regression, particularly what we saw last year. The footwork that he showed and the sort of panic in the pocket that really became a consistent problem is just not what you should be seeing from a guy that is this hailed number one prodigy type prospect here and a guy who's been in the league for several seasons here. I was really concerned with the version of Trevor Lawrence that we saw last year. There was a stretch where it looked like this guy had figured it out a little bit, gotten back on the right track. I don't feel that way currently about his outlook in the league, and I have him sort of circled as I think he has some real questions to answer this year. So no, I do not believe he deserves to be in Jalen Hurts conversations.
I'm with you. I think everyone has fallen in love with the idea of Trevor Lawrence and what he was as a prospect than actually who Trevor Lawrence is. And yeah, he has all the tangibles that you could want, like obviously huge arm. He's a big guy. He's great mechanics in the pocket that people I think really, really like. But the production just hasn't been there. And a lot of people want to make the excuses for him, which is why I don't think he's received the criticism, is that he's dealt with some disastrous situations there. Of course, he had Urban Meyer for a year, which wasn't good. People blame his development or his lack of development on Doug Peterson. They had the one good season where they made the playoffs, won a playoff game. But again, Doug Peterson probably wasn't the right guy for his development. Now he's on to his third head coach. And how many years? What is he, 4 or 5 years in the league at this point? He's on his third head coach. So that there is some legitimate excuses you can make that I wouldn't even say are excuses. I think they're legitimate reasons why maybe his development hasn't progressed the way everyone thought it was when he was the surefire #1 pick and considered one of the best prospects in decades when he was coming out of Clemson. But when you talk about the Hurts argument, here's what I would say to Hurts. Hurts has had a different play caller every single season of his career. So, yeah, he hasn't had the instability in the organization because the Eagles are a great Class A organization in the NFL. And for the most part, he's had Nick Sirianni as his coach since he took over as the full-time starter. But he's had a different play caller, and that matters. Like, that's learning new offenses. That's learning a new system in a lot of ways. And that's just getting on the same page as the guy who's going to be calling your plays. And a different play caller every single season is not something to balk at. Like, that's a pretty huge deal. And people kind of discount that because, oh, he's just won regardless of it. He's won regardless of that. But people make that as an excuse for Trevor Lawrence. Like, all right, Trevor Lawrence has dealt with different coaches and he's had to learn new systems and all that. Jalen Hurts has had to in a way too. And I'm not comparing everything about them because, of course, the Eagles have done a great job surrounding Jalen Hurts with unbelievable talent on both sides of the ball. I mean, they're one of the best organizations, the best organization in the NFL for a reason, while the Jags haven't done that. But I don't want to hear those excuses for Trevor Lawrence when you're comparing him to Jalen Hurts because Jalen Hurts has dealt with a lot of the same things.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that is a really important point that gets lost in the Jalen Hurts discourse all too often there. And just to sort of reflect on what Trevor Lawrence has done to this point, really struggled as a rookie. The team went 3-14 when in games that he played as a QB record there, threw just 12 touchdowns all season, 3,641 yards, and led the NFL in 17 interceptions. Then flash forward to his second season, which is when he put things together a little bit. Played all 17 games, went 9-8, threw for 4,113 yards, 25 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, earned a Pro Bowl opportunity there. Then in season 3, the wheels start to fall off once again. Still decent numbers as far as the yardage, over 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, but 14 interceptions once again, and a little bit of dip in the yards per game there. And then last year, he played just 10 games. The Jaguars were 2-8 in those games, just 2,045 yards, which comes out to a career worst 204.5 yards per game there, 11 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. I do think there was some regression in his decision-making once again. I would just express a cautionary tale for the outlook for Trevor Lawrence. And as you mentioned, he was hyped up as this can't-miss prospect. This is the next potential face of the NFL. I do not want that to get lost in the conversation, that if he settles in to be like a fine NFL quarterback, that's sort of an underwhelming outcome for Trevor Lawrence, I would say.
I think there's such few quarterbacks in the NFL who are situation-proof. And what I mean by that is no matter how talented you are, you have to go to a great situation in the NFL to succeed. Yeah. And you can have a lot less talent and maybe a worse prospect, but be in a great situation. Like you look at Bo Nix, who I really like as a quarterback, but he went to Sean Payton, one of the best offensive masterminds of this generation as a coach. And that really helped his development. If Bo Nix was in a situation like Jacksonville or in a situation, I don't know, like Cleveland or something, where it's just not great quarterback development, not great organizations where they're surrounding you with the necessary parts that you need for your development, it's a completely different story with him and a lot of other guys. So I think there's very few quarterbacks who are situation proof. I mean, maybe like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, like Joe Burrow, those guys are so exceptional as quarterbacks that they're situation proof. I don't think Jalen Hurts necessarily is. I think if Jalen Hurts went to a really bad situation, a bad organization, we'd be looking at his career a lot differently. So I think Trevor Lawrence fits that bucket where he's really talented. And a lot of people thought he might be situation proof, but he's not. And he needs a really good situation. The Jaguars have been a bad franchise and the bad job surrounding him with necessary parts, and that includes their coaches. But it's really now or never for him. I mean, they gave him the massive contract because they had to. Like a quarterback that talented who shows at least signs of being a really good quarterback gets that contract after a few years in the league. But now it's time for Trevor Lawrence to show that you can win with him and he can be a franchise level quarterback because Liam Cohen's coming in and he has a long leash. Liam Cohen. This is the guy who's going to be fired after 1 or 2 seasons. The Jaguars trust him to take over this offense and to really develop Trevor Lawrence into the quarterback that everyone thought he would be coming out of the draft. So I think it's now or never for Trevor Lawrence and Liam Cohen. And I think those guys are going to have a pretty decent year because I still trust the talent, even if the situation and the career thus far hasn't gone the way everyone expected it to.
Yeah, you got Brian Thomas Jr., you got Travis Hunter. It is now time to show out and put up some numbers for Trevor Lawrence. So we'll keep it rolling here. To bring it back to the question that if you were to just replace this team's starting quarterback with Jalen Hurts, how much better do these teams get? So are any of these, do you object to being upgrades as we cruise on to the New England Patriots, the Arizona Cardinals, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Chicago Bears? Any objections to those four?
No, not this year, because I think the question, if I'm correct, is really just this season, going into this season. Who would you rather have on your team? Yeah, for sure, Jalen Hurts. I do think there's an argument that you can make in a couple years where you're projecting the next 10 years, a Caleb Williams, a Drake May, maybe with those teams, that you'd rather have those guys. Right now, the answer is Jalen Hurts, no question.
Where's your panic meter on Caleb Williams after 1 year?
It's not very high. I think again, he was a guy who people thought would be situation proof. He was a guy who's number one pick who people thought was just unbelievable talent. And he showed again, he's not situation proof. And such a few crop of quarterbacks actually are situation proof. And he went to a really bad situation. An awful coach who was a lame duck coach. Everyone knew he was getting fired after the season. Bears should have done it a year earlier because it really hindered Caleb Williams' development. But I also thought how bad he was greatly exaggerated. I mean, he wasn't good, especially when you look at some of the other rookies like Jaden Daniels, but he finished the season pretty well. Like, I thought he was pretty average. He wasn't some disastrous quarterback. They shore up the offensive line a little bit because he was running for his life last year, got him a couple more weapons. I think this is a huge year for Caleb Williams, but the panic meter is pretty low at this point.
Yeah, I'm not the number one Caleb Williams guy in the world, but the thing that I really respected about him last year is just the way that he got up every single time, that he really got beat up throughout the entire season, and he just picked himself up, went on to the next play. There's obviously a lot of changes that need to be made to shore up that offensive line, to have a little bit more of a concrete game plan so it doesn't look like he's just running for his life in the way that was a weekly issue last year. But I mean, I don't think anything from last year should really change how you view the kid, and we'll see how he bounces back. But a big season for Caleb Williams upcoming here. Now, here's where we get into the weeds a little bit here. For starters, Pittsburgh Steelers, don't think there's any conversations about that. I think Jalen Hurts would be a clear upgrade there. The Houston Texans, I think, is an interesting one. CJ Stroud is a guy who burst onto the scene, sort of had like a Jaden Daniels type of rookie season where it was about as ideal as you could hope for. Earn a Rookie of the Year, take your team to the playoffs, that he's hyped in these early conversations for. This is one of the top quarterbacks in the league, and really sort of took a step back last year. The old sophomore slump did hit him pretty hard there with CJ Stroud, and he finds himself in sort of an interesting conversation with where these QB rankings are. So my question to you, Sam Oshtry, if you were to replace CJ Stroud with Jalen Hurts directly here, are the Houston Texans a better football team?
It's tough. It's a tough question. Here's what I'll say. The Eagles are a worse football team. I'll flip it the other way. If you put CJ Stroud on that team instead of Jalen Hurts, the Eagles are a worse football team. Now, do I think Jalen Hurts would make the Texans better? I'm not entirely convinced. Again, that goes back to the point that Jalen Hurts is in an unbelievable situation, not just for any quarterback, but really for his skill set. So that's really tough. To answer the broader question, who would I rather have right now, Jalen Hurts or CJ Stroud? To me, the answer is Jalen Hurts, because we have to see how he responds to a pretty poor sophomore season. I mean, you said it was a pretty historic rookie year that he had, bringing his team to the playoffs, winning a playoff game. And then his interceptions go from 5 to 12 from year 1 to year 2. His quarterback rating in year 1 was 100, went to 87 in year 2. All of his entire statistical profile diminished in year 2. But I think that's also natural and normal for a lot of second-year quarterbacks. And I've said this a lot throughout this NFL offseason as we talk about the rookies of last year and the rookies of this year. It's really hard to scout a guy mid-season and figure out his weaknesses and tendencies from week to week, and as NFL teams are game planning. But you hear coaches talk about this all the time. From year 1 to year 2, when you have a full offseason of scouting a guy and trying to expose his weaknesses, especially if you're in the division and you're constantly playing them twice a year, it's much easier for coaches to kind of expose those weaknesses. So I think you see sophomore slumps frequently with those guys because of a full offseason of scouting that coaches have. And I don't think that's something that should be discounted. I think that's something we might see from Jaden Daniels this year. And I think that's something what we saw from CJ Stroud last year. I think CJ Stroud's still a great quarterback. The talent's there. He's going to be a top 10 quarterback in this league for the next few years. But this is a really important year for him to see that, all right, what are these things that all these teams scouted and exposed about me? And he dealt with some injuries at wide receiver, and he didn't have as good weapons as he did for his first year. But still, he has to make a bigger jump in year 3. And I think it's a really important year for him. But for now, I'm still going with the Super Bowl MVP because he's the Super Bowl MVP.
And we're back with the audio here, but of course,
I didn't know if that was just me. I was like, was that I could because my computer's been bugging out this entire time in StreamYard. So I was like, I can't hear him. Is that me though? I
that's
guess.
right.
I
We're
guess.
fighting through today, but yeah, I do think that there's a little bit of grace I give him for the injury to Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell getting hurt, even Nico Collins, I believe, missed a game or two here or there, so not the easiest pathway for him. I'm buying the CJ Stroud stock this year. With that said, I do not think he surpasses Jalen Hurts by any means. Now, one of the bigger topics of conversation in these is the Los Angeles Chargers. And this is probably the biggest gap of any matchup that I think we've mentioned to this point. But if Jalen Hurts is on the Los Angeles Chargers, how much does their outlook change as a team, Sam Oshtry?
Not that much. Not that much, because what Jim Harbaugh did last year for Justin Herbert was take the ball out of his hands less. I think his average pass attempts per game went from 35 to 29. That's taking the ball out of his hands less, and that's their offensive coordinator who did a much better job of just, it was Greg Roman's system, of course, who came from the Ravens. He did a much better job of dominating the run game and using that offensive line and relying on the run game and then using Justin Herbert less. And that's kind of how the Eagles approach using Jalen Hurts, where Jalen Hurts is also a threat as a runner, much bigger threat than Justin Herbert, but they rely on their great run game and their great offensive line to carry that offense and to move the chains. And that's what they did last year, all the way to a Super Bowl with a historic season from Saquon Barkley. I think the Chargers have a similar approach. So when you put just Jalen Hurts on that Chargers team, he would be just as good, probably better, because he's a better passer than Justin Herbert in my mind, but and more accurate and better decision maker and all those things. But it's kind of a similar offense where you don't want the quarterback doing too much. You want to rely on your run game.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger difference than we're making out. But I think if you were just
Shocker.
Directly swap Jalen Hurts with Justin Herbert, I think there's a real chance the Chargers have a Super Bowl right now. I think that team is good, man. I think that team is legitimately good. That defense, especially last year. I'm sick of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams getting talked about like they're scrubs. They're good wide receivers that Justin Herbert played alongside for years that he was unable to maximize there. And just giving the guy the ball with the game on the line, you're going to get some drastically different results with Jalen Hurts being that guy over Justin Herbert here. So I do think that there's a real chance that if you just directly swap Herbert and Hurts, there's a real chance that the Chargers have a Super Bowl ring on their finger. At the minimum, I think they're in that same conversation of the Josh Allen, the Lamar Jackson of you got there, but have you slayed the beast? And if we're going to go down the track record, I've seen Jalen Hurts go toe-to-toe and outplay Patrick Mahomes in 2 out of 2 Super Bowls to this point. So I do not think he would blink at that matchup there. I think that is something that Chargers fans, no matter what they want to say, that in their heart of hearts certainly should feel that way at the end of the day as well.
I do think it's important not to discount the intangibles that Jalen Hurts has over most of, if not all of, the quarterbacks in the league, which is his mental makeup in big moments, and what we've seen in 2 Super Bowls now, where he was incredible, and what we've seen throughout all of his playoff games, and in big time moments where he steps up, and that's his clutch factor, that's his mindset that a lot of other quarterbacks don't necessarily have at his level. But again, like Justin Herbert has 21,000 career passing yards in 5 seasons. That is the most in NFL history through 5 seasons. Like, I think he's another guy where people love the idea of him, so he's overrated. Yeah. He's overrated to the extent because everyone loves the idea of the talent he can be, but he's also been highly productive, and I think it's better when the ball's out of his hands and you're relying on your run game more, but he's also been highly productive. He has 15 game-winning drives. 15 game-winning drives in 5 seasons. Like, that's really impressive stuff. And so the playoff numbers aren't there. So I would never take him over Hurts because just of his playoff performances, where Hurts elevates his game in the playoffs and Justin
not there is quite the understatement here for the rest.
Yeah, well, Hurts elevates his game in the playoffs, and Justin Herbert does the exact opposite of that, which is a fair critique of him, and I think why a lot of people rank him lower than maybe what his production during the regular season would say that he should be ranked. But again, 15 game-winning drives in 5 seasons is nothing, is pretty significant. And then that's pretty impressive from him from a clutch standpoint. But the playoff numbers aren't there. So, yeah, I'm taking Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, last time we saw Justin Herbert on a playoff field, he was throwing 4 interceptions against a pretty mediocre Texans defense, I might add there. But nonetheless, we'll keep it moving with that. I've stood 10 toes down on that take for quite some time and still feel that way. I think it's kind of crazy the Chargers are carrying 2 quarterbacks better than their starter on their current roster with Trey Lance.
You texted me Trey Lance is better, and I said to you, if Shanahan couldn't unlock Trey Lance, then nobody can unlock that, brother.
I don't know, man. You watched Trey Lance at all in yesterday's preseason game? He was looking pretty intriguing to me. I'll say that.
Preseason football.
Yeah, I'm fired up, Sam Oshtry, but we'll keep it rolling here. This one was closer than I think I initially thought it would be. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you were to directly swap Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts, are the Buccaneers a better football team?
No. I'm torn, actually. I'm torn.
Yeah, this one was in my head. Like, I was kind of going through the teams that I didn't think would be a problem, and I got to the Buccaneers, and I was like, I don't know. And the reason that I say this is because it does feel like Baker is such a gunslinger. That's just kind of his mentality as a quarterback, and that's basically how that offense is designed. Is they're going to air it out, they're going to rely on their weapons, they're going to allow Baker to go up and throw for 300 yards on a pretty consistent basis here. That's pretty different than how Jalen Hurts functions as a quarterback. Is that he is more systematic, being more, I guess, a sure thing, a safe thing in the decision-making process. It works for Tampa Bay, and Baker's been very much the epicenter of that. It's been cool to see him have a career resurgence here. I think stylistically, this would be sort of a tough clash to compare.
Yeah, it's a tough question when you compare Hurts and some of these other quarterbacks because the system is everything, and you kind of create your offensive system around your quarterback, and that's what the Eagles have done by bringing in a great rusher and Saquon Barkley on a great offensive line. He had the weapons, but again, like if he was on the Bucs wouldn't have this approach where they would be throwing the ball 35 to 40 times a game because that's just not how Jalen Hurts operates. So you kind of have to create your system around your quarterback. And the Bucs have done a really good job of that, as have the Eagles, but they're completely different quarterbacks. People forget that the Bucs defense, they're known as this defensive group because of their head coach, but their defense was pretty average last year. It was their offense that carried them to a great season. That's because Baker Mayfield, as you said, he was a gunslinger. They threw the ball a ton last year, and he was really, really productive as a passer. So if Hurts is in that offense, he wouldn't have been as productive. His interceptions would probably be higher. His completion rate would be way lower if he had to throw the ball that much. But they wouldn't be throwing the ball as much with Jalen Hurts. And you flip it and you put the Baker Mayfield on the Eagles. Baker Mayfield, I don't know how he'd operate as a guy who doesn't need to throw the ball that much. As a low volume passer, which Jalen Hurts was last year. So it's a difficult question. Like, I think Baker Mayfield is a more talented passer, but that doesn't mean he's a better quarterback necessarily. So it's really situation dependent when you look at these two teams who play completely different offenses. But Baker Mayfield had a tremendous year last year. Like, I don't want anyone to discount that because he was incredible. And that was their offense that carried them to a great season, not their defense, which was pretty average.
Yeah, no, 100% there. I think I ultimately just slightly lean on yes, that I think the Buccaneers get a little bit better, but I do sort of think this is like a lose-lose situation for both teams if we were to have this discussion. That I think both guys are in their rightful spot here. The 2023 season by Jalen Hurts, where he did play like an MVP candidate, was when I kind of can convince myself that you can make a case this, but I don't think Tampa Bay would take this swap for a one-season standpoint or outlook there. So sort of an interesting talking point. These two, I think, are a bit easier, and I'm sort of climbing up the list of odds, these coming off DraftKings Sportsbook here. Don't kind of confuse why they're this high on this list, but the Denver Broncos and Minnesota Vikings. While it would be a blast to me to see Jalen Hurts and see Jalen Hurts in a Kevin O'Connell system, I don't think there's much room for discussion that he would be a massive upgrade over either Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, at this point in Bo Nix's career, you got to see more than the dip and dunk that he did. And I think Bo Nix is going to be a great quarterback. I'm a big fan of his. But the Broncos put him in a great situation where they just got the ball out of his hands early, really short, easy reads, and he just didn't move the ball down the field. So you got to see, and that's credit to Sean Payton and Bo Nix, but you want to see more of his development in terms of throwing the ball down the field this coming season. So I think Bo Nix is going to be a really good quarterback in this league for a long time. You can win a Super Bowl with him eventually, but he's not better than Jalen Hurts right now. You're not taking him over Jalen Hurts. And JJ McCarthy, I'm not a fan of. I don't even think Kevin O'Connell is capable of unlocking him. And even if it was Sam Darnold still, I would say you're taking Jalen Hurts over Sam Darnold.
Yeah, not a JJ McCarthy guy either, personally here. If I had to ask you right now, how much older is Jalen Hurts from Bo Nix, what would your prediction be?
Well, Bo Nix did good 6 years in college between Auburn and Oregon. So what's Jalen Hurts, 26?
Just turned 27.
So Bo Nix probably at least 25, 26.
Yeah, he's 18. Jalen Hurts is 18 months older than Bo Nix there. So
and four more years in the league. So that's what it's about.
Yeah, and I just like to bring that up as sort of the Bo Nix conversation for like this is probably who he is. This is not sort of a young guy who's going to go through the growing pains. Every guy has a little bit of a different path. JJ McCarthy is a guy who's pretty experienced and seasoned as well. Bo Nix may be exactly who he is. Now he had an impressive.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. Mark Henry said that to me on Saturday too, and I just don't agree with it. I think when you play as much college as he did, you're going to have an immediate impact in the NFL, and there's not as much of a learning curve in the NFL when you play as many college games as he did. So I think that's why you saw him be good immediately and carry his team to the playoffs. But I also don't think this is his ceiling. Like I think his ceiling is he can continue to develop as a downfield passer. He has a great arm, and I don't think this is his ceiling at all. I really think Bo Nix can become a quarterback you can win a Super Bowl with, and like a top 12 to 15, 10 to 15 guy in the league eventually. So I don't think this is a ceiling at all. I think the Bo Nix that we saw his rookie season is honestly his floor, and his ceiling might not be that much higher than his floor. But still, there is a higher ceiling for Bo Nix.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm certain he will have better seasons than he did last year that I think will settle and find his footing. But I guess my take here is I don't expect this guy to take that leap into like the truly elite quarterbacks in a way that I sort of would hold out hope for when I'm taking a first round guy and a guy like in Bo Nix's situation. Now, to keep it rolling, this one I think is the first L that I will accept in the Jalen Hurts conversation. The Cincinnati Bengals. If you were to replace Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts, are the Bengals a better team?
Of course, no question. He's one of those very few quarterbacks, and I think there's actually 4 of them, and everyone knows they're the top tier in the NFL. Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, where those guys are situation proof. It doesn't matter the situation you put them on, the weapons you have, the offense you're running, those guys are going to perform at a really high level. And Joe Burrow has just been given an awful defense. I mean, his offense was incredible last year, and they started winning games late in the season when it was too little too late. But it's not a great organization, and it's not it's an awful defense it was last year. We'll see how it improves this year. But Joe Burrow still performed like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So, yeah, Joe Burrow, you put him on any situation, any team, he's better than Jalen Hurts, and he's a guy you can win a Super Bowl with or contend for a Super Bowl immediately.
Yep, I do fully agree with that there, that I do think Burrow does fall into that category. And even when last year it was ultimately viewed as a disappointment as they did not qualify for the playoffs and obviously the record not being what they hoped it was, I did nothing but gain more respect for him as a talent and a football player for the way that he was able to carry that roster in such an impressive way. So shout out to Joe Burrow. And if I had to bet right now, I would guess he comes out pretty hungry this year for some results early on. Another guy to bring in the mix, the Los Angeles Rams, which is another conversation that I think is a bit more difficult than I expected to be. Matt Stafford getting old, getting up there in age. I think in a one-game sample size of any situation that Matt Stafford can still play with the best in the NFL. We'll see how much his body has left in the tank. There are some questions even about his availability for the start of this season. But if we are to give him the benefit of the doubt from a health perspective, do you think the Rams would swap Jalen Hurts and Matt Stafford and be a better football team?
I don't think they would. I think Sean McVay would prefer Matt Stafford. And similar to the Baker Mayfield situation where they rely on Matt Stafford to sling the ball a ton. And Jalen Hurts is better as a low-volume passer with a great running game. And that's not the Sean McVay offense necessarily, at least with Matt Stafford. And I think Matt Stafford is similar to Baker Mayfield. He's just a gunslinger, and his accuracy and his decision-making is just better than Jalen Hurts as a passer. So when you look at the entirety of the quarterback position, I'm not necessarily saying Matt Stafford is better right now than Jalen Hurts, but I don't think the Rams would rather have Jalen Hurts over Matt Stafford. I think Sean McVay would prefer Matt Stafford. There is the question of health. If you're factoring that in, Jalen Hurts, he's had a few injuries here and there, has missed some games throughout the regular season, but he's been largely healthy for the most part. Matt Stafford has not been, and now he has a back injury, and he's supposed to be back at practice today. Really supposed to be his first practices this week since training camp opened. But again, a back injury is nothing to mess around with a quarterback at his age. So the health thing is really the only concern. But if you're not factoring that in, strictly from a play style standpoint, I think Sean McVay would much rather prefer Matt Stafford with the Rams than he would Jalen Hurts with the Rams. And again, the Rams were really good last year. I mean, they finished the season as one of the best teams in the NFL. They were the only team that gave the Eagles any trouble throughout the entire playoffs. Really last like 3 months of the season, you could say, when Jalen Hurts was the starter, the Rams were the only team that gave the Eagles serious trouble. And it was a different game because it was a snow game and all that. But still, the Rams easily could have won that game, and the only team to compete with an Eagles team that was just on an absolute train wreck, dominating the entire NFL. So this Rams team is really good, and that's with Matt Stafford at quarterback.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all that. And the other point that I'll just throw, I guess, point of concern I have from an injury outlook standpoint, it did raise some red flags to me, the fact that the Rams seemed legitimately open to, if Matt Stafford moves on this offseason, it's not going to be the end of the world here. That there was some of it being directly tied to that contract and the dollar figure and all of that. But the fact that it wasn't as locked on, this is our guy, we're going to do everything possible to keep him, did raise a couple eyebrows in my mind there. But I do ultimately agree with your premise here that I don't think McVay would do that as an upgrade. And Matt Stafford, even at his age, even with the injury concern, in a one-game sample size, can look like the best quarterback in the league if you catch him at the right time. So shout out to Stafford. I do think that falls in the same sort of Baker Mayfield category here. The Green Bay Packers are next, and I don't think this is a close one. I think Jalen Hurts is comfortably better than Jordan Love. Am I wrong there?
No, you're not wrong, but I don't think it's a massive gap. I think Jordan Love, I think in a year from now, you could be having the conversation Jordan Love is a better quarterback. Certainly in 3 years from now. Certainly if you're talking about who would you want for the next decade. I think Jordan Love is still a really good quarterback. I think he dealt with an injury against the Eagles actually in week 1 last year that really hampered his rushing ability throughout the entire season. And Jordan Love is similar where he needs to rely on his legs as much as his arm, like Jalen Hurts. He couldn't rely on his legs at all last year after that injury in week 1. He missed a few games, and then he came back probably early just to battle it out, and he was still hurt, and it was very obvious. And he started playing good football at the end of the year. But I just thought that was a injury-ravaged season for Jordan Love, and it wasn't the best situation for him. I think you're going to see an awesome year from Jordan Love this year. I think Matt Golden is going to be an immediate impact wide receiver from Texas who they drafted in the first round. That's going to help him even more. So I think in a year from now, right now I'm taking Jalen Hurts. He gets the benefit of the doubt. He's a Super Bowl MVP. But in a year and 2 years from now, I don't think it'll be a question that Jordan Love is on most rankings ahead of Jalen Hurts.
Wow, that's interesting. I would not go that far with that. I think Jordan Love is fine. Like, I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I think you can win with him, and I do think he's like a top 10 quarterback in the league there. But I would put him like a tier below, maybe even 2 tiers below Jalen Hurts, at least right now. And I don't love the spot that Green Bay has put him in. Like, all this investment in the wide receivers, these are a bunch of like talented guys that like would be good on any football team. But from the Jaden Reeds to Dontavius Wicks, and you go down like the list, they're all sort of just guys to me. They're all like, I prefer a system when you have a clear number one, and maybe the addition of Matthew Golden helps things sort of settle itself out. But in general, they've sort of leaned on like this, like jack of all trades, master of none type of mentality from their wide receivers with a lot of guys with overlapping skill sets, which I haven't loved from a mentality standpoint there. But you are right about the injury. I forgot about how much that was impactful last year, and that happening right in week 1. So who knows? We'll see what this looks like. I think I would throw Jordan Love in the conversation of an important year for a quarterback this season as well. Mm-hmm. All right, and we'll keep it moving. I believe Sam Oshtry still with
Jordan Love.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
You got me?
Yep. Cutting in and out a little bit, but I got you.
Bit of a lag here. But I think Jordan Love as a rusher is going to be much better this year. But yeah, we can keep it moving.
Mm-hmm. The San Francisco 49ers, I think this might be like the top of the list of teams that would be itching to make this move, to be perfectly honest. Now, granted, I gained some respect for Brock Purdy last year, and how did he look like? I think Jalen Hurts on the San Francisco 49ers is a Super Bowl contender this year. I do not think that is the current case with the current 49ers roster.
Yeah, I don't think there's a question. I mean, you're talking about Brock Purdy or Jalen Hurts. I think the answer is pretty obvious. I think most quarterbacks could excel in Kyle Shanahan's system, except obviously Trey Lance. But I think most quarterbacks could, and I think Jalen Hurts and Kyle Shanahan will just his system. He'll make sure his system works for whoever the quarterback is because he's that much of a genius offensively. It's not even a question. Jalen Hurts is obviously you're taking him over Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I think that that is a pretty universal opinion there. And again, I do think Jalen Hurts on the San Francisco 49ers would be a Super Bowl contender this specific season. So we'll keep it rolling. This is one that I think people would dig their heels in a little bit. The Washington Commanders is an interesting talking point here. Now, I'll preface this with my personal take. I think we've rushed to crown Jaden Daniels a little bit quickly here. He had an excellent rookie season, about as great as you could possibly hope for. Rookie of the year, looked incredible, led the team on some comeback drives. Again, a postseason appearance and just absolutely slinging the pill from start to finish last year. We've seen a lot of guys have very excellent rookie seasons. CJ Stroud, who I just spoke about a little bit earlier, it was just a calendar year ago that we were having these same conversations as it pertains to him. I do think Jaden Daniels is a good quarterback. could be one of the best in the NFL. I don't think he is quite there yet, and it would not shock me whatsoever if the sophomore slump hits him particularly hard this year. I think Jalen Hurts is still the clear-cut better quarterback that deserves the benefit of the doubt. Where are you at on this discussion?
I'm with you, and it's something I talked about earlier where I think you're going to see regression from him as you do from many sophomores as the league figures him out and has a full offseason of scouting him, especially this NFC East, which is, it's a difficult NFC East. Obviously, the Eagles are the favorite, one of the Super Bowl favorites, but then even the Cowboys are going to be relevant this year and better than they were last year. The Giants, I think, are going to be better than last year. Still the worst team in that division, but better than last year. So this is a really tough division that I think will figure out Jalen Daniels more than they did last year because of full offseason of scouting. So I'm not sold that Jalen Daniels is just going to be this surefire top 5 quarterback in the NFL the rest of the next decade, like everyone kind of thought C.J. Stroud would be after his first season. And then there was heavy regression his second season, and nobody has him in their top 10 really now. So I think you're going to see that from Jalen Daniels. So I'm taking Jalen Hurts right now. But again, it's similar to a lot of these guys over the next 5 to 10 years. Who would I rather have? Probably Jalen Daniels, because I think Jalen Daniels is an incredible talent. And as a dual threat guy, which you kind of have to be in the NFL at this point. Like you have to have that ability to move outside the pocket and to gain yards on jumbled plays and broken plays to pick up a 5 to 8 yard gain just with your legs. And Jalen Daniels has that ability, and we know he is as a passer already as a rookie. So I think Jalen Daniels is going to be great, and he's going to be great for a long time. But right now, the answer is still Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and another guy that I would note, kind of connect to the Bo Nix timeline a little bit, that Jayden Daniels did his time in college football, that he is 2 years younger than Jalen Hurts, despite Jalen heading into his 6th season while Jayden Daniels heading into his 2nd there. So something to sort of keep in mind. Again, every guy's pathway is a little bit different there, but I do think we forgot that he honestly should be looking a little bit more polished when he makes the NFL leap. And now, granted, he was great last year. Like, there's nothing to take away from his rookie season, but I think the Stroud comparison is like a really fair and interesting one based on how that trajectory went. And I also will note that Terry McLaurin's situation is more than just a non-story here. That is his guy, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL, and the fact that does seem to be some hard feelings between him and the organization, I don't think is the best thing heading into that sophomore season for him. So I would just bookmark the Jayden Daniels conversation. I do believe in him and like him as a quarterback overall, but let's just pump the brakes a little bit on these top 5 discussions and how high this guy has climbed on some of the rankings and see what happens in year 2. Now, to keep it rolling a little bit, the Detroit Lions is one that fired me up a little bit. I got an image of Jalen Hurts in a Lions uniform, running a triple option where he can pitch it to Jahmyr Gibbs, and you got Jameson Williams running an end around, or him chucking up for Amon-Ra. This is another case where I think you throw Jalen Hurts on the Detroit Lions right now, there's a pretty likely chance in my mind that they may have a Super Bowl ring on their finger.
I'm with you on that because I think the separator for this between Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts is the playoff stats and then the playoff production. And what we've seen from Jalen Hurts is much greater, even though we didn't have an amazing playoffs from a statistical output last year before the Super Bowl. In a few of those games, it was the Rams snow game, it was the Packers, whatever. Like it's not the end of the world. We know in the biggest moments he's elevating his game, and I'm not 100% sure that Jared Goff does that. He wasn't very good against the Commanders last year in that big upset that the Commanders had over the Lions. So that's really the separator for me. I think Jared Goff is most people would probably say they'd rather have Jared Goff. And most people would probably say outside of Philadelphia that Jared Goff is the better quarterback. But the separator for me is the playoff stuff. And it's who they are as quarterbacks in the playoffs. And that matters. And that's really important. And that's why Jalen Hurts gets the edge.
I think you're lying to yourself if you think that in the first place, that I think Jalen Hurts is just a better quarterback than Jared Goff pretty much across the board here. Let's not forget that the team that selected him number 1 overall elected to move on from this guy, that he was not moving the needle. And I do think that is a rare win-win trade with the Stafford and Goff conversation. But
it's also like who Jared Goff was 5 years ago is not who he is now. Right, like Jared Goff he wasn't great to start his career. Even when they made the Super Bowl, he wasn't even that great. He's a much better quarterback now than what he was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also will note this is a guy I have circled for could look pretty bad this year, that there is no longer Ben Johnson creating the system, that there has been a lot of turnover. I think the Lions as a whole are a team that I have some huge question marks about because of obviously changes at both coordinators. And I think that was a team where Dan Campbell fits the Nick Sirianni model where he can be the CEO, he can be the fire you up in the locker room guy, but you got to have his coordinators sort of run the show to an extent from a game plan and game day type of thing. I like Dan Campbell. I don't mean that as necessarily a critique, just kind of the best way for things to run there. I'm just curious how things do go down in Detroit this year. But nonetheless, to keep it moving, we are now at the big dogs.
I just want to say that the only thing for Jared Goff is that look, even though the running game, they still rely on Jared Goff to throw the ball a ton. And when you look at those passing attempts, I think Jared Goff threw the ball like 500 plus times last season.
Yeah, and we got a little bit of cutting in now. A little bit of cutting out, but I got the main premise of it. Yeah, Jared Goff does air it out a ton there. But yeah, I still think I'm rocking with Jalen Hurts, and I think a lot of Lions fans would as well at the end of the day. Let's get into the big dogs.
I don't know what's going on with my Wi-Fi. I got full bars. All my apps are closed. I don't know what is going on with this Wi-Fi right now. I'm in the perfect location. Wi-Fi always works. I don't know what's going on, but it's really pissing me off right now.
I hear you. And track record pretty good. We typically do not have these type of issues. So who knows what's going on in the world today. The Kansas City Chiefs. I do not think I can talk myself in the conversation that Andy Reid signing up to take Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes. Do you think there's any chance where that is the case?
Nothing to be said about that. Even though Jalen Hurts has, between two Super Bowls they played head-to-head, Jalen Hurts has outperformed them in the entirety of those two Super Bowls. That's a fact. I'm still going Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts absolutely has there, but no, I think Patrick Mahomes is the system, as our good friend James Harden likes to say quite a bit there, that he's done some pretty special stuff. And I do think Kansas City has sort of pushed the limits for just putting just a guy around him from a wide receiver core perspective that he has not had Tyreek Hill in several years. They've just sort of really pushed these limits of it does not matter who the pass catchers are. Patrick Mahomes is going to make them at least competent there. And he's delivered on that premise. So I do think Patrick Mahomes is the story here. The Baltimore Ravens is one where I think there is more debate. I think Jalen Hurts, if he's on the Baltimore Ravens, they become a better football team. I think you disagree with that there.
Come on. Are you not a Lamar Jackson fan?
My Lamar stock took a huge hit last year, and I think the playoff shortcomings we have to discuss with him a little bit firmer is the case. Me and Mark Henry Jr. had a quite spirited conversation about this a couple weeks ago, but I mean, just to lay out the playoff stuff with Lamar, just keeping it completely on the stats here, that across his 8 playoff games has thrown for 1,753 yards. He has 10 touchdowns and 7 interceptions there. And if we want to go on some of the exact game log stuff, the one that really stands out to me is against Buffalo, against Josh Allen in its entirety. This happening back in 2021 to this point, put up 3 points in a playoff game, threw for 162 yards, had 1 interception and a 1 fumble there with no touchdowns tallied.
It's not fair. It's not fair to me because there were legitimate playoff concerns. And yes, he hasn't got over the hump and he has to get by Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow and those guys to be considered on their tier. But that was a few years ago when there were serious struggles in the postseason that were concerning. You look at the postseason loss last year to Buffalo, he wasn't bad. You look at the postseason loss 2 years ago, 2 years ago to the Chiefs. I didn't think he was bad in that game. His offense didn't do great. I think Josh Allen outperformed him. I think Patrick Mahomes outperformed him because those guys are better quarterbacks, especially in the playoffs. But he wasn't bad. It's not like, oh, you can't win in the playoffs with this guy anymore, and he's the reason why you're losing games. I'm not saying he was great, but he wasn't this awful playoff performer like you've seen from a Justin Herbert who had a playoff collapse last year. That didn't happen. And so I don't think that's really fair. Lamar Jackson is a way better quarterback than Jalen Hurts, and he is a way better passer. Lamar Jackson, because of his struggles as a passer earlier in his career and because of how great of a rusher he was, he's not considered this great passer now, but he's the most underrated passer in the league because he's a top 5 thrower of the football, strictly. And that doesn't even include his rushing ability and everything that brings to the offense. He's a great pocket passer. And that's what people discount with him. So I don't think he's better than Josh Allen or those guys. And when people go that far, I'll argue back and push back on the playoff stuff. But the playoff stuff the last couple of years hasn't been bad. It just hasn't been as good as those guys.
Yeah, you're right about that. We're in the upper echelon of quarterback conversations that I think both these guys crack the top 5 of the NFL and stand pretty firm in that take there. But there is this comforting put the ball in his hands with the game on the line and he's going to deliver that I feel about Jalen Hurts that I don't about Lamar Jackson. The statistical stuff, the regular season stuff, Lamar exceeds him. There is no argument about that. But I do think from like a decision making standpoint, from a turnover standpoint, there are more red flags than I think I personally have been aware of and really fully talked about from Lamar from the standpoint. You absolutely can still win with him. This can be absolutely be a guy that puts a Super Bowl ring on his finger at some point in a Baltimore Ravens uniform. But I do think if you're just talking about a chance to win, I think Jalen Hurts gives you a clearer edge from a
Okay,
postseason.
but Lamar Jackson doesn't have an AJ Brown and Smitty. Like he's had a good running game, but he doesn't have a Saquon Barkley. Like he
Derrick
doesn't.
Henry.
He's not Saquon Barkley. They have a real. I mean, they did have the number 1 rushing team in the league last year, but that was a lot because of Lamar Jackson, not
So is
just
Saquon
Derrick
and
Henry.
Jalen, though.
Derrick, yeah, that's fair, but Saquon Barkley is the best rusher in the league, and they have the best offensive line in the league, which really helps Jalen Hurts. Derrick Henry's awesome, and their offensive line is really good, but it's not at the Eagles level.
Derrick Henry also, I would say, is more. You put him on any team, he's effective in a way that Saquon is not.
You don't think Saquon's effective on any team?
Derrick Henry on the Titans was more effective than Saquon Barkley on the Giants.
But that was also a good Titans team. Like those Titan teams made the playoffs and were like close to AFC. I think they made an AFC championship one year. Those were good Titans teams. Even if you don't love Ryan Tannehill as a quarterback, those were good teams. The Giants just sucked all around. It wasn't Saquon's fault.
I think good is strong. They were
They
competent.
made that AFC championship.
Yeah.
And they were always in the playoffs. Like that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a fair take that Derrick Henry was more effective on the Titans than Saquon was on the Giants there. And I think like if we're going to do these comparisons, that in the same way that Lamar and Derrick Henry are complementary to each other there, Jalen and Saquon absolutely are. Now, with that said, like I think these are the right combos here that I think like these two specific pairings, like sort of fire and ice combo that they got with Lamar and Derrick Henry there versus Saquon and Jalen being, I don't know if best, I guess all around is a better term. I think they complement each other the best and how the current pairings are, but that would be my point there.
I think the receivers matter too, especially when you're talking about a guy. Lamar Jackson throws the ball way more than Jalen Hurts does because they trust him to. And Lamar Jackson doesn't have an AJ Brown or a Smitty. And like the knock with Hurts is that when you go back to 2 years ago, when he had to throw the ball a ton, he wasn't a good passer. His decision-making was poor. His interceptions were way up. And that's when he didn't have an unbelievable running game to rely on. So that's always going to be the knock with him, where you saw him as a high-volume passer one year, and he was not good at all. You've seen Lamar Jackson, a high-volume passer, still be great.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think if we're talking about winning a Super Bowl, man, there is something that
I get you, but like that's why I put Jalen Hurts number 5 right now. But Lamar Jackson's on a different category as a quarterback. It's not even close in terms of the talent, I think.
Yeah, I do think it's close here. Lamar is more talented. I do think it is. They're in the vicinity here. Let's swing it to the next guy, Josh Allen here, who I think is other interesting conversation. I'll let you lead with this one. Would the Buffalo Bills ever consider swapping Josh Allen for Jalen Hurts?
Never, never, never in a million years. Josh Allen has turned the Bills into Super Bowl contenders strictly because he's on the team. That's the only reason. You can say their defense was pretty good last year. Josh Allen isn't working with some great weapons. Josh Allen is that incredible of a quarterback where he's on any team, and that team is a Super Bowl contender. You can't say that about Jalen Hurts. You can't say that about almost any other quarterback in the league other than Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and maybe Joe Burrow. So Josh Allen is the number 2 quarterback in the NFL to me. I argued that he should have won the MVP last year, and then he did win it, even though I thought it was going to go to Lamar. Josh Allen is the second best quarterback in the league. The Bills would laugh if Howie Roseman ever even caught about that. The Bills would laugh them off and hang that phone up.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue here. And I will say I'm still like blown away by the turnaround that Josh Allen had from what he looked like at the very start of his career to what he currently looks like for a dude that was one of the most reckless decision makers that I've ever seen with the football to a guy who is the legitimate MVP of the NFL. There is pretty impressive stuff there. So yeah, I'm not going to fight over that too much.
I'm seeing a lot of Josh Allen's the best quarterback in the league though recently after the Mahomes' Super Bowl and just how the season finished for the Chiefs last year. To me, that's ridiculous. Where do you stand on that? Who's the best quarterback in the NFL right now?
I still think it's Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
I still think that should be the guy that holds the belt. And even I get obviously Jalen Hurts won the Super Bowl MVP, has the title, and performed on the biggest stage last year. I don't think people are given enough credit for how much Patrick Mahomes elevated that offense around him and took that specific Chiefs team to another Super Bowl. But again, I think they're really pushing the limits of we're just going to bring in whatever wide receivers and Patrick Mahomes is going to make them look fine. But he has held up his end of the bargain in that category. So yeah, I still think Mahomes is the top quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, I get it from the argument that the Bills' offense has been so great, and that's because of Josh Allen the last couple years. And the Chiefs' offense has gone the other way, where the first 5 years of Mahomes' career as a starter, that offense was incredible. The last 2 years, the offense has heavily regressed across the board, and their defense has actually been one of the best in the league, and their defense is carrying it to these great records and all these wins. And in the playoffs, Mahomes does his thing. But there's no argument you can make when those guys have gone head-to-head. Josh Allen has lost to Patrick Mahomes 3 of the last 4 years in the postseason. And that's not all obviously they're not playing each other head to head. It's their defenses that they're going against. And it's not that Josh Allen has been bad in those games. He hasn't been at all. I mean, even last year was a 32-29 final that the Chiefs won. But Mahomes has been better. And there's no way you can watch those games and have any other takeaway than the best quarterback on this field throughout the game was Patrick Mahomes. And he's just been better than Josh Allen. So you have to beat the best to be the best. And Josh Allen has not done that just yet. It's similar like the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady stuff, where Peyton Manning could have been considered probably a better passer and maybe like a better, more talented quarterback throughout those mid 2000 years up until the late, or I guess early 2010s. But who was always winning in the playoffs and who was getting it done in the clutch in the postseason? And that was Tom Brady. And that's why he's always and will be considered better than Peyton Manning, because of those rings and because of how he dominated the AFC in a way that Peyton Manning didn't. So it's similar with that to me with Josh Allen, where you can make the argument Josh Allen has to do more for his offense and is the more talented quarterback at this point. But Patrick Mahomes has done it time and time again in the playoffs and the postseason. So there's no way you can rank Josh Allen as number one quarterback in the league right now.
Yeah, and I honestly think the Manning versus Brady comparison is a really fair and good one with these two, especially as their careers continue to pan out there. I also would really love for Kansas City to really invest in, let's get Patrick Mahomes a top guy as a wide receiver and just let's see some magic happen. Let's bring back some form of Tyreek Hill, bring him his own A.J. Brown or whoever the guy may be. Obviously, keep A.J. in Philly, but somebody of that caliber, I think would be kind of cool to serve as a reminder, everybody, to just how good Patrick Mahomes is. And especially when we are in the dwindling years of the Travis Kelce era here, that's not going to be around forever as age catches up with him. So I would like to see them load up with a couple more weapons for Mahomes and let him rip it in a way that he has not been in several years. So to recap before we wrap up here, the only 3 teams that I'm saying for sure hang up the phone immediately and do not believe that Patrick Mahomes that Jalen Hurts increases their chances of winning football games here. I think it's the Cincinnati Bengals, the Buffalo Bills, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Who are the other names that you had on the table for this discussion?
To me, the Ravens are 100% in that too. And I think that's how you view this question, is how you view the quarterback rankings and that dynamic, where to me, Jalen Hurts is the 5th best quarterback in the league. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year, after next season, that ranking changed a little bit, where he's a little closer to 10 than 5. And I think most of the league, as we saw with that ESPN article, when they interviewed a lot of scouts and executives and GMs and all that stuff and coaches, and Jalen Hurts was closer to 10 than 5. And I think that's how most of the league views him, because of the incredible situation he's in, which is the best situation of any quarterback in the NFL. But to me, it's 5 right now is where he's at his ranking, because of his postseason play and what he did in the Super Bowl last year. So there's 4 teams that the answer is a complete no. It's the Ravens, the Bengals, the Chiefs, and the Bills. Everyone else, you're taking Jalen Hurts over that guy, even if you have to entertain it for some of those teams.
Yeah, no, I do think that is spot on there. So I thought this was a fun exercise walking through that. And the message, I think, for Eagles fans here is just let's appreciate who Jalen Hurts is a little bit. There would be a lot of teams dying to be in the spot that the Philadelphia Eagles are currently in, with him representing as the face of the franchise and quarterback. Super Bowl MVP Jalen Hurts is ours. So, Sam, any final thoughts on this topic or anything NFL season before we sign off here?
No, we'll do the division picks. We went long on this, so we'll do division picks next week. We'll give all of our division picks, and then we'll do some award picks too. Look at those betting markets, and then maybe we'll give some Super Bowl picks too. because season's coming up. Season's
Yeah.
coming up. And we're both college football guys too, so maybe we should dive into some college football as well.
Yeah, I've been cranking out some previews for shout out to DraftKings Network. Wrote up a nice Sunbelt preview the other day,
Nice.
diving into Conference USA. So I'm getting in the waters here in college football. So yeah, I will be back and locked in for all that. Me and Sam going to hit on it all right here on Fox Sports The Gambler. So make sure you guys keep it locked to the dial. Drop a subscribe, drop a like, give us a shout out on social medias wherever you are listening at. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, and me and Sam will be back talking with you next time. Peace.